Hello, everybody. This week, my mic is probably going to sound a little bit different. I am actually in Chicago. My father in law had a bit of a health scare. He's in the hospital, but seems like he's doing better. But I had to bring my portable wireless microphone in order to keep up for this week. So if it sounds a little different, apologies. Might be here for a while, so I'll see what I can do about changing the audio quality depending on how long we'll be here and what I can bring with me. But this week, I wanted to talk about the future, as I see it, of diversity in the film industry, which the long and short of it is I don't really see much of one, at least as far as mainstream Hollywood goes. I think that obviously we're not going back to the 30s where black and brown people aren't allowed to be in films, but as far as our own original stories, voices, people that are at the heads of things, being given kind of carte blanche to do whatever they want or present the stories that they want, I think that it's going to be a while before that returns again. The first kind of warning of this was when Issa Rae said that she's having a hard time getting things greenlit and that she's going to go independent. When Issa Rae is saying that she's having a hard time and that she's having executives either not understand or not be willing to take a risk on her, that's when you know that something is up. And it's so anybody who is established and I think has a show running, that show will continue to run, obviously. But as far as getting new people in the door who are being given creative freedom, I think that's going to be difficult. And I want to just address something that's come up during this time as far as diversity in the industry. There's this attitude that there are new, fresh voices that are coming in, like the Issa Raes and the Quinta Brunsons, and they're new as far as the greater general public, but these are people who have been toiling on their own for years. Just going back to Issa Rae, she was doing a YouTube web series that got picked up. Quinta Brunson was doing YouTube skits and acting for years. So these are actually seasoned professionals that have finally been given an opportunity to run something of their own. This isn't, and I think a lot of what the misconception is as far as diversity, and especially in the film industry, is that somebody just picked up off the street who just landed and then is being given the run of a show. That's not the case. The people who you're seeing now are people that have been in the industry for a while. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. They've been around the block, and they're just getting an opportunity to take that next step. So that's next step for people who aren't them is going to be hard. It's going to be very difficult if you're trying to do it the industry way of quote unquote paying your dues and making one for them and one for you, and that whole game. That's going out the window as far as I see it. Partly because of the current administration and they're clamping down on DEI, whatever that means. Since a lot of the major studios are owned by either a large tech platform or a large studio, they want to be left alone. They don't even want to, at least for the next couple of years, they don't even want to do anything that hints of controversy. You're probably going to see shows and movies that reflect the current administration. You're already seeing a $40 million documentary being made about Melania. So that's one end of it. And I think the other end is that a lot of people are just getting fed up. They're tired of waiting. We waited for a long time to get a shot. Then we weren't really given a shot because if you made something on your own and it was picked up, that was one thing. But if you were given an opportunity, a lot of times either the budgets were low, you weren't given creative control, and then if it works out, you're celebrated. But if there's an issue, then it's blamed on you and diversity. So I think I'm seeing that a lot of both established and up-and-coming filmmakers and showrunners and writers are just like, why am I continuing to do this? Why am I trying to go this route if it's just becoming harder and harder, the money is less and less. If I have to take less money, I would rather have more creative control, because there's no sense in taking less money and not having any kind of creative control. Especially when I'm taking less money, the people who I'm working for are taking more money, and I'm not really able to do what it is I want to do. So I think you're going to see a lot of filmmakers and showrunners look at what are the other options that are out there. We're already seeing it that some established showrunners and writers are looking at YouTube as a viable option. I know some people are looking at Tubi. I have mixed feelings about Tubi, especially because they're owned by Fox. And I know that supposedly it's very lucrative for filmmakers to put their work on Tubi, but I'm wondering if Tubi is just taking a lot of black films and TV shows in order to build up their reserves and really just gain a wider audience. And once that audience is gained, they're going to shut that pipe off. It's one of those, do you put your film in while the getting is good and there's some lucrative opportunities to be had, and then once the pipes are shut off for black and brown movies and TV shows, you take the money that you've earned and reinvest it somewhere else? Or do you just not even get involved with that? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. I'm still trying to find some people to talk to in order to figure out what the best pathway forward in regards to that. And I think while it is bleak for the traditional methods, I think this will lead to a time of experimentation. I think a lot of us, because we don't have access to the big budgets and the traditional marketing structures, we're going to try a lot of experiments. We're going to try doing things a different way. We're going to try not only marketing things a different way, but maybe structuring the things that we do in a certain way. If it doesn't have to meet a certain set of standards, we can just break those standards and really go outside the box, which I think is what audiences want anyway. You hear it time and again that people don't want remakes and sequels, and part of that is because they've seen the story before, but also because it's following the same patterns that we've seen before. It's the same story structure. You put in fresh faces, but it's pretty much the same. The plot is the same. It's presented the same. Eventually you can start to predict what's going to happen in the movie. And even the trailers show us the entire movie. I don't know how many of those trailers that you've seen that are like 2 minutes and you've essentially seen the movie, so why would you go out and go see it in a theater? Theaters are actually struggling right now because they don't have enough movies to show, because the runs are so small, so that they have a big gap in between when one movie runs and the other one runs. So who can fill that gap? Here you go, independent filmmakers who called you up and say, I have a movie. How much is it to screen it for X amount of time where you're waiting for the next big blockbuster to show up? Which can help the big theaters, but it's really going to help the small, formerly second-run theaters. Here in Chicago, we have one called the Music Box, which shows a lot of films that you haven't heard of before, a lot of independents, a lot of foreign films that you can't get anywhere else, and they let them run for a bit. And I think also something else that we're going to see, especially with, again, this comes back to the fact that tech companies something else that I think we're going to see, especially the fact that America seems to be going on this path of trying to homogenize everything. We're really pushing AI advancements and technological breakthroughs, which, again, not to get too deep in the weeds of it, but while the utility of AI is great, generative AI tends to make things very much the same because it's all on the same data. So it's giving you a predictable output. And again, just as audiences are sick and tired of seeing the same thing over and over again, generative AI will only increase that even further because they're all trained on the same data. You'll see a lot of the same images, especially if it's used prevalently. And audiences in general, they think it's interesting, but it's not really attention grabbing. It's, oh, that's cool. It's like when 3D TVs came out. It was neat for a minute, but then it was like, okay, we did that. Can we do something that's actually original? So what really needs to enter the creative sphere is chaos. That's what AI has a hard time dealing with, is inputs that it did not expect. So I think we're going to see a lot of that domestically, but I think also you're going to see a lot of that coming from outside the US, places that either don't have access to all these tools or don't really see the need for them. You're already seeing it on Netflix that there's a lot of foreign shows and movies that are coming in, especially from Korea. But I watched All We Imagine as Light, which was shot in Mumbai, and I'm just going to predict that there's going to be a lot of fresh voices that come from outside the U.S. because, A, they have a lot of government support, so there's that. B, they still rely on film as a communal experience, and they still treat it as such. They treat it as though it is not a commodity, but they still regard it as an important art form, whereas we're heading towards commodity. It's the way that our system is set up. We have to commoditize it in order to earn a living, and now we're having trouble with that. And our focus as filmmakers here in the U.S. is to make a film as big as possible so we can make as much money as possible. It's not necessarily been to push the art form forwards, and that's not just now. That's been happening since the 70s and the new wave of American directors. All of them, even as Francis Ford Coppola, he was struggling with whether he makes more films that have commercial success or whether he stays true to the art form. And with the influx of money that was being thrown at a lot of them who were also very young, they got sucked into it. And I think also you're going to see a lot of, I don't want to say older, because then let's just say seasoned. We'll see a lot more seasoned filmmakers doing interesting things because they have the combination of creativity but also experience. So the restrictions will be taken off and they'll just start doing things in a different way because they have the experience in order to know what they can pull off and what they can't and what they can push for. So I think you'll see a lot of quote unquote fresh voices that are like that, in combination with younger voices that don't even want to go the Hollywood route, or at least they don't want to begin by doing that route, like working up and paying your dues. And I think at the long and short of it, we're just tired of waiting. We've been promised again and again that if we do these things, then we will get this reward. And it's never happened. It's always been this eternal carrot that's being led in front of our faces again and again. It's like the dog races where you have the hot dog at the end of the stick and it just keeps going around and around in a circle. And we are the dogs running on the track trying to get the hot dog that we will never really be able to catch. And we're just waiting until it's over and we're given some scraps and we're supposed to be happy with it. So if we're going to get scraps, we might as well just find our own scraps and make the best meal that we can out of it. And I think that's what we're going to see because we're tired of waiting. We're tired of when we get opportunities, it being downgraded and denigrated, that we didn't work as hard as somebody else, that we're not qualified, that we didn't pay our dues, and that we're just not good enough, when the truth of the matter is we've had to work twice as hard to get half as much. So we've actually had to do more, and we are overqualified, and we're not being given the opportunities to do. So we'll just go make our own. I think for a lot of us, we're not entirely turning our back on the system. We're just not going to be bowing down to it. I work in Los Angeles, so it's outside the realm of possibility for me to completely turn my back on the system. But I think there are a lot of people that are like, I'm tired of this. I want change, and I'll go make it on my own. So that's what I see. I see diversity in the film industry not really being there, not being there in a true sense. And when I say diversity, a varying array of experiences and perspectives informed by culture that influences the work and the art that you make. That's what diversity is. And the film industry right now is very much against that. Hits and homogeneity are the rule of the land right now. So that's what they want. It's not really what audiences want. So it's going to be interesting. But for a lot of the people who have been marginalized, not only in the country, but in the creative industries in general, we're going to try and go our own road and see how this all shakes out. I have a feeling that as profits continue to go down for the industry at large, they're going to turn to a lot of us and ask for our assistance. And it'll be very interesting to see who gives that assistance and who doesn't. So it's going to be hard and lean times for a lot of us, but we're filmmakers. We're used to it. We're used to never having enough money and just making it work. But I think a lot of us are just seeing that one door has closed, but there's a bunch of other ones that have been open all this time that we've ignored because on the other side of the original door, there was the promise of wealth and riches and a good time and everything that we ever wanted. But it's a false dream, and we're just starting to wake up. So yeah, that is my take on the future of diversity in the industry. I'll be back next week, and I want to talk more about the way I see the road ahead, which is, I think for independent filmmakers, it's going to be super local and also going very global, which I know is, but to me it makes sense, and I'll dive deeper into it next week. So thank you again for listening. I know this is a short one, but I just wanted to give my quick thoughts and perspective, and I will talk to everybody next week. Take care.